Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Hi there. Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I am Darrell Scott. I'm tongue-tied. I don't know why. This is like the 18,000th time that I've tried to do this open, but I think we got it done. We're going to talk to a gentleman today. The first thing I'm going to ask him, are you proud of your college this season because they beat Notre Dame?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I have no idea what their standing is in sports. I don't follow college football.
I saw that you graduated, and I just followed it, and I realized earlier on in the year that the Northern Illinois, and don't get me lying about what their nickname is, but they beat Notre Dame, and now Notre Dame is going for the championship game on the 20th of the month. This is Brian Simpson, ladies and gentlemen. Most of the time, like I said, I'm Darrell Scott. We're going to talk music. We're going to talk about some good things, some things that he's doing, his history, and some things like that. So, Brian, first of all, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing good, man.
Good to see. The one thing I'm interested in always when I talk to musicians is, especially in your case, when you started out, you did a lot of things with a lot of different people, Gerald Albright, Norman Brown, so forth and so on. When you're in the younger part of your career and you're playing with these big wigs, what are you learning from them that you still apply to yourself now as a band leader?
Well, everything that I learned from them, and you mentioned a couple, but that list is so long. We'd spend the next 15 minutes talking about it. But my biggest influence that I personally worked with was George Duke, because the relationship was 10 years, and happened. I moved to California after college, would it be 1986, and that was when I just started. That was before the internet. When you were trying to find gigs, I didn't know where to look. I didn't even have any connections here. I was looking in basically what's called the want ads for R&B keyboard player wanted, that kind of thing. So it was not an easy climb. But one thing led to another, and then I was at a jam session in the east of LA, someplace. It was like an hour and a half drive away from LA. Who do I meet that night is a drummer. First of all, I met Gerald Albright playing at a jam.
Right.
And the drummer, a guy named Michael White, who at the time was with Frankie Beverly and Mays.
Okay.
So there's some guys already doing big gigs.
Right.
And I became friends, especially with Mike White, became my friend, So that was the first step to someone that could kind of help me get into some auditions. He got me a chance to audition for Teena Marie. I started there as my first tour. Then I went on to work with Sheena Easton for many years, but that's doing pop and R&B gigs. And then, of course, playing in town with various people, Everett Harp, Norman Brown. Norman was teaching at a Musicians Institute in Hollywood at the time.
Right, yeah.
So he wasn't the Norman Brown everybody knows.
Right.
And Boney James was also playing with us at the time. He was going by another name at that time, too. He was, so everybody was just kind of getting started out, like a lot of names that we know today. Were in the early part of their careers. But then I got a chance to audition for George Duke, who, of course, was already, an icon at that time. And he became my mentor and friend, and he helped me learn so much about this business, the actual business part and the music part. and running a band and dealing with artists. And we used to do a lot of package tours. So there'd be several artists at time. We'd be out with Najee, Jonathan Butler, Rochelle Farrell, all together. And
Hmm.
and so you're dealing with a lot of egos, either on the studio or on tour. And how fortunate I was to have someone like George to
Right.
kind of look up to, because this
Hmm.
is everybody respected him. And there was just the way he took care of business was so cool, professional, and fair and honest with musicians and songwriters. And this is talking about the business side of things
Right.
too,
Right.
publishing and working on albums where you're a songwriter or something. Um, because believe me, there's a lot of crooks in this business too. So
Hmm.
I was just really fortunate to get to work with someone like that. That was just a great man, all the way around.
So what's the word I want to use? So are you the aggressive, ask a lot of questions, or are you just going to sit back and kind of observe the movements of all the musicians around you?
Um, well, when it came to, let me put it this way, when I first started with George, it was a four-piece band: me, George Duke, Stanley Clark, and Dennis Chambers on drums.
Wow.
So yeah, so there was, it was like just tons of respect, but I was just welcomed in as one of the cats, like right off
Right.
the bat. So um, it was just, I'm quietly observed. That's how
Okay.
I learned.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to recording, though, George had a great engineer named Eric Zobler who did all his recording in his studio, because George, touring and making his own records was just one aspect of George's
Right.
career.
Oh
He
yeah.
was
Right.
also a major record producer, songwriter, who had his own recording studio where a lot of these records were made.
Hmm.
And so a big part of that is the recording process. So I made friends with his recording engineer, Eric Zobler. And now I was always picking his brain on
Hmm.
recording. And that's, if I have a sound today on my records, it has a lot to do with the equipment that I was instructed to get back then.
Right.
So, so that's where I really wanted to, other things I could absorb just watching it happen, like
Hmm.
playing live concerts. But the studio work, you really got to know what you're doing. And I was lucky to be guided really well right from the start. So one of the microphones I bought and the preamps and stuff to make my first record in 1995, I don't know many artists today, piano players that could say they've used the same piano on all of their albums. I just
Really.
finished my 12th album. I've been using the same piano for 30 years, same microphones, same preamps. So my piano sounds exactly the same since 1995. Unbelievable.
Wow. How was there ever an inkling, a thought in your eye that I need to upgrade, or this is just I'm so comfortable with this, and it sounds like
Um,
I want it to sound. This is what I'm going to stick with.
yeah, that's kind of it, because it's not even the piano is actually a 510. It's not even a 7 foot grand or something like 9 foot grand piano.
Hmm.
I realized in this style of music that isn't really what it's about. I'm not recording a concert sound with a
Right.
lot of left hand. This is basically the middle of the piano where the chords are played to the top where the solos are made.
Right.
That's what really matters for my music, for this my style of contemporary jazz or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Um, that's what matters, and it has a vibe, it has a unique sound, and that's what I like about it. So I'm happy, and I have thought about upgrading something or changing, but honestly, I don't think it would be better for what I do.
All right. This comes from my days of working at the Holiday in Beechwood. I won't tell you what I did, but once every 60 days or so, someone would come in and tune the piano that was in the lounge. How often do you tune this 30-year-old piano?
Well, the piano's older than that.
Well,
It's been
how
in my
how
house for 30 years. I bought
right.
it used. Um, but it's probably more like 40 or 50 years old. Um, I tune it often while I'm in the process of recording, like
Hmm.
every week. But throughout the year, I could go months without being tuned.
Really? I always
Yeah.
thought that the more you played it, the more you drive a car, the more it needs oil or something like that. Not necessarily true with the piano. You can play it for long periods of time, and you don't have to worry about. taking it to the shop and having the oil change or something like that.
Well, my piano stays in tune well, but I'm saying I don't need to frequently tune it until I'm making a
Oh,
record
okay.
and recording it. I don't.
Okay.
My piano will go for months without being recorded. Let me put it that
Okay.
way. And
Okay.
that
All
makes
right.
no sense. It just doesn't matter.
Good.
But it
Um,
never goes horribly out of tune or anything. It's you wouldn't sit down and touch it and run out of the room screaming or anything. So
when that guy came in to tune that piano in that lounge, I ran out of the room. Just
okay,
don't get me
is
wrong.
that bad? Huh? All right.
It was just, and then somebody would come in later in the evening and play, and it would sound wonderful, and I'd stand there going, the next time that guy comes in, I'm going to sit and watch and see what he does, and at least figure out what he does. Um, how long have you? When did you start playing? When did you start recording?
Well, um, I started making albums actually with a group project before I made my own albums in the earlier '90s. I was with that gentleman, Mr. Michael White, that was playing with Frankie Beverly and Mays.
Mm-hmm.
He was making He had his own record deal in Japan, so that was my first chance to get in a real recording studio, working with real cats and putting songs on an album and learning that whole process of recording, mixing, um, arranging songs, and just trying to create a sound and a vibe. And honestly, I just finished my newest album, which will be the album will come out, I believe, in single will come out maybe later in January and the album in March. But it's a culmination of these 30 plus years
Mm-hmm.
of learning the process, writing songs, and then doing the overdubs, which means recording the drums, the bass, guitar, saxophone, to my whatever's in my brain, the arrangement that I want, bringing that to life. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole what it's all about. Other than this is completely separate from me doing concerts and touring, which is
Right.
takes up most of my time seemingly. But what really matters is the albums to me because that's your legacy. That stuff will be around
Right.
long after I'm gone. So I put a whole lot of effort into making these things, and it's the magic. It's like if I can touch someone emotionally in any way, and I know the music does because they come up and tell me at the shows,
Right.
but that it means something to them, and it's a wonderful feeling to know that something I create can actually affect someone else's life in some way, their mood.
And you have done that. And speaking of that, let's listen to something that you've done, which I just love. The tune is called Something About You. You're listening to it on the Jazz Flyte Podcast with myself, Darrell Scott. That's me. And over there, and the funny thing is, I never know where you are once this thing gets produced. Uh, that is Brian Simpson. Let's take a listen. Welcome back to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. You just heard a tune called Something About You by our guest today, Mr. Brian Simpson. Brian, what's it like to be on stage when it's not necessarily, I'll say your show, but when you're playing with George Duke, when you're playing with some woman named Janet Jackson, and is there additional pressure to perform? Is there a different kind of spontaneity when you're up there and she jumps to some solo or they jump to some solo and you got to come back in and follow that. Can you describe that feeling?
Well, I I'll tell you this. There's a certain philosophy that it just became natural for me to do this. But when I'm in a band, and I will say that I believe this is the reason why I always got gigs and I always kept the gigs that I got, was that I would never make it about me. If there's a singer, a saxophone player, whoever it is out in front at that moment, it's their show or their solo, whatever. My philosophy has been, what can I do to make that better? It's
Hmm.
not, I don't need to show off. I want the whole band to see what I can do or the audience to see what that's pointless. And I realized early on that because I would be intimidated. I'd meet other musicians when I came to LA. I think, God, these guys are playing circles around me. But how come I keep getting gigs and they don't? Is because it's not about you when you're in any
Right.
situation.
Hmm.
It's about because ultimately, hopefully, we're creating some kind of art that's happening in the moment,
Right.
and which is what live music is. And uh, and if there's more than one musician, we're in this together. So you really
Right.
got to work together. And it's a kind of teamwork. And if you're doing stuff for if you're the drummer and you start showing off, or the bass player, you start doing some crazy stuff, you're no longer part of the team. Now you're kind of doing your own thing, and
Right.
it throws everything out of whack. I suppose there's some kind of music where that may make sense, but
Hmm.
not for the music that I make in contemporary jazz. And so uh, I'm trying to enjoy, and it doesn't always work, but there are just moments in live concerts I could be playing with. For instance, I will tell you this: I've worked with Peebo Bryson many times.
Hmm.
He's one of those guys. His voice is so incredible that and some beautiful songs. And I've been playing with him where I almost forget what I'm playing because I'm so like get wrapped up in what he's
Right.
doing.
Right.
Like, this sounds good. And I'm just like,
Right.
man, just I love those moments where the music is just so good. And it's not about me at that point at all. I'm
Hmm.
playing for someone else. So now at the same time, if it's a Brian Simpson show, there are also moments where I feel, man, this is just feels good, but I'm listening to my whole band like
Right.
100% what everybody else is doing,
Right.
and I can tell when they're listening to me. And so as long as everyone has got that awareness of what each other is doing, it can be just a wonderful experience. But it doesn't always happen in a live concert. So
Does it change when you are the musical director of the band? I mean, now you have a bit more responsibility, correct?
yeah, that's that generally in when it's the case for me, those are responsibilities that have taken place long before the concert,
Hmm.
hiring musicians or just getting the music to everybody, arranging the rehearsal, little details, stuff like
Right.
that. That's just details. And for the most part, once you're on stage, all that goes out the window. It's like you're on your own, buddy. It's
Right.
like we gotta count this off and get going.
Now, you have been fortunate enough to travel Spain, Portugal, Japan, a whole bunch of places. Let me ask you two questions here. What's your favorite non-American city to play in? And then if I were giving, if you were giving me vacation places, your suggestion, where would you go? Where would you tell me to go?
Um, well, I would have to say, and I love every place I go. It's a thrill for me to go, especially even third world countries or formerly third world, like Indonesia,
Hmm.
Mozambique. These are in the experience of going so far away and finding people that actually want to hear you play is so beautiful. And the people can be so wonderful that how could you not love all those experiences? They're all great.
Hmm.
But with that said, I recommend to everyone London. Well, first of all, it's not the number one tourist destination for no reason at all. There's
Right.
a reason. It is the
Right.
number one spot, It is crowded, but there's so many. First of all, if you like European cities, which I'm attracted to the sights and seeing
Hmm.
buildings that are hundreds of years old. It's wonderful. But beyond that, the people are fantastic, and I do have a blast playing there because I play a little jazz club, the very traditional style jazz club in Soho, and where you got to go down in a basement, low ceiling, beautiful Steinway grand piano. It's a
Hmm.
wonderful experience, and just the warmth I get, and I'll play 3 nights there every year. I've been there for probably the last 10, 15 years. And I just have a ball there because it's consistent and it's a wonderful city to be in. So I could tell anybody, yeah, that's a great place to go. And you can walk the entire city and be entertained. You don't even need to get on any kind of transportation. You could walk for 5 hours and just have a blast.
Okay. Where would you tell, what is your vacation recommendation?
Well, you asked about a city. I said
Oh,
London.
okay.
So
London? Okay. So it's London.
that's a
Now,
city.
my thing is when you're there, so you play 3 nights. So you get, say the show starts at 7 o'clock. You get there at 6. I'm just guessing. From the moment you get up to the moment you head to the venue, what are you doing? I mean, are you just sightseeing? Because I have a suggestion, which I've suggested to everybody who goes someplace. You need to be taking pictures and put together a tabletop book of just the places you've seen and the places you've been to. I think I got one guy that's going to do that, and I think he's doing it right now. That's Nathan East, because his son signed on with me. He said, "Yeah, Dad, we need to do that." And I'm like, "Good, I got an ally." Um, but I just think that would be so cool to get a collection of what you've seen based upon, because there might be things that you see or you know about that I would never know about. So,
Hmm.
would you?
Well, I do post a lot. I mean, how many times can I post a picture of me next to Big Ben? But
Okay.
it's at some point it's just overkill. And so I don't know. I kind of limit what I do. I try to do a little bit of clever stuff that you wouldn't normally see from a show or some aspect of a concert when I can. But it's
Hmm.
difficult. I'm a one-man team, so I don't have someone else traveling with me to help me
Right.
with social media or anything. So I'm usually wherever I am, whatever city it is, I'm planning on the next city. I'm
Oh,
looking
okay.
to advance things,
Hmm.
constant process. I don't have a manager. I'm the manager. I have an agent, a booking agent, but I have to handle all my own travel arrangements and accommodations and hiring musicians in other cities. So it's a full-time job, just being me.
So, are you an independent and don't have the backing of Big Brother being the record company? Is that what you are?
Well, yeah, my last, 9 albums have been with the same record label,
Okay.
but it's not like the old days where and a record company is going to support your tour or something. You
Hmm.
run your own as far as that goes. But they're a wonderful label, and that's the reason I'm able to keep making albums and getting the music out there.
Is it? Are you? What do you do? Do you give yourself guidelines to say I'm going to put out a product every year, every 90, not 90 days? That would be a bit rough on you. But are you doing something every year? Are you doing something every year and a half? How often are you putting out product?
It's just as it's ASAP, which usually is a year and a half. But it's just how long it takes. It's just kind of I can't.
I,
If I was doing cover tunes, it's a different story. But when you're
right.
trying to come up with original songs, there's no getting around the time that it takes, especially after you've done 12 albums. That's 10 songs an album. That's 120 songs you put out. It's coming up with 10 new original songs that are good is always a challenge. It's always a challenge.
And we're gonna let's do this first. All right, here we go. We're gonna play another song from our guest Brian Simpson. This is "What Am I Waiting For" on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. That's What Am I Waiting For from Brian Simpson, our guest on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Brian, little birdie told me that you're going to be in the city of Cleveland toward the end of the month. What can our fans expect from your show? I know from just the stuff that I've listened to and the stuff that I've listened to in the past, I'll be sitting front row. So that guy you see sitting in the front row just clapping his hands and having a good time, that'll be me. But what can you tell folks what to expect when they watch you this upcoming at the end of this month?
Um, well, if you're a fan of my music, I think you'll be happy because I try to cover all the bases a little bit from all the albums. And the other thing that I enjoy in my shows is using local musicians, of course,
Right.
and letting them play. I one
Hmm.
thing that you asked me about working for other people when I was coming up. One thing that would frustrate me would be how little they would feature some of their musicians sometimes,
Hmm.
especially if you've got a really good one in your band. Like, let the guy play.
Right.
So I like to not overdoing it, but I like to really include the band in my shows and
Okay.
make them equal partners in the performance. So I love because that was another aspect of the music director thing with me is that I do feel like I lead a band well.
Hmm.
For me, I approach it kind of like remember the Vietnam War when the guys would be leading a platoon into something? Well,
Yes.
that's kind of how I approach it. It's
No,
like,
okay.
I'm leading the platoon and we're going into a little battle. So that's what it's like for me. And I love, inspiring people, not
Hmm.
trying to make a musician feel bad about something. I'll try
Right.
to lift them up, and get them, push them. 'Cause a lot of people never do that. They've never been kind of like, you can do this a little bit, get a little closer to the audience or something,
Right.
So, I like pushing them to another level. So it kind of elevates my music, it elevates the other players, and you get an audience hype that way too, So it's fun.
You are in the midst of finishing up your new record. What can you, and I don't know if we should call them records anymore. I'm so
Oh,
done
yeah, I
with
guess you
that.
still can. That term doesn't seem to go away.
Yeah. What can you tell us the title? Can you tell us anything about the new project? What can you tell us?
I'll tell you this much. I have featured a couple of uh, hot young cats, man. Have you know about Keon Harold, the trumpet player?
I
He's
heard the name.
Grammy nominated
Right.
currently. Well, he's on a track, and this very young saxophone player from Chicago named Isaiah Collier. And you can look him up. He's been written up in the New York Times as a second coming of John Coltrane. This guy
Oh,
is awesome.
yeah.
And so yeah, these aren't the usual suspects on a smooth jazz record, quote unquote. So that's what I like about it because it's got some excitement. And this record, like I said, it's a culmination of my 30 years in this recording business. And I am very excited about it. All live players. And actually, tomorrow I'm going in to mix. It's already been mixed, but we're doing another special kind of mix for this project. Have you heard about Dolby Atmos?
No.
Okay, well, you can look up ATMOS,
Okay.
Atmos. It
Okay.
is all the new records are done on this. Not many jazz records. Well, the Robert Glasper, Keon Harold, his new record are done on this. Spyro Gyra's new record, Boney James' new record is done in Atmos. It's a special mix. You can only hear it with certain headphones. They got to be either Apple headphones or maybe some of the Beats, but and it's also available in like a brand new S-Class Mercedes or something like that. Some high-end cars are starting to come out with this
You'll have to give me
capability of playing this back. But it's called, if you look on your phone, on your iPhone, it's spatial audio is another term for that.
okay.
And it kind of, you feel like you're immersed in the band. Anyway, I'm having my album mixed in Atmos
Nice.
tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. This will be the first time I've experienced it. So I'm kind of thrilled about that. It hasn't been anything to get excited about in audio in a long time.
Right.
since the invention of stereo about
Uh,
70 years ago. So this is something new. All the big labels they're going back, they're remixing old albums. So you mentioned
wow.
old Janet Jackson. I've seen old Miles Davis, Kind of Blue was
Mm,
redone in this. And so the labels, they probably know something we don't know. They're going back and doing
okay.
these old albums. They're having them remixed. There's, just you haven't
Hmm.
spent money on that. So it does have a future. So check out Dolby Atmos,
Okay.
ATMOS.
Okay. And the four-legged fan of the show has arrived. He's down
Okay.
here. So if I look a little awkward, that's because he wants his attention. Um, one last thing. How can our fans follow you, keep up with what you're doing, when this new project will be
Well,
released and things like
of
that?
course, I'm easy to find Facebook or Instagram, but if you go to my website, there's also links to all that stuff, and
Hmm.
including Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora. If you go to bsimpsonmusic.com, or just
Okay.
look up Brian Simpson.
Okay.
I'm the one that's not the comedian, Brian Simpson.
There were two of you, and it took me a couple of minutes to figure out
Yeah.
which one was which one. And that has actually happened a lot with artists. There's a guy who there I'm not going to mention his name, but he has you really have to be careful about how you put his name in because it comes up with I first looked at it and I realized what it was, and it was like, I don't think this is him because there's something distinctly different about what's going on here.
Mm.
Brian, thank you very much. I've had a great time. This has been fun. I look forward to seeing you at the end of the month. Um, like I said, the first guy in the first row waving his
All
hands
right.
in the air like I don't care. And hopefully, I know the band that's playing with you. I know the people who are putting it on. I will get an opportunity to meet you and snap some photogs
Oh,
and,
for
and
sure.
we'll and we'll go from there. Oh, this dog is incredible. Um, it's just, well, I'll show you a picture in a minute. All right,
All
Brian,
right.
thank you very much. You've been listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm Darrell Scott. Please join us again next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that groove through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.